The heavy wooden door shuts behind you with a dull, final thud. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make it clear that no one is coming back to open it anytime soon. Darkness follows almost instantly. At first, you think your eyes just need time to adjust, but seconds stretch into minutes, and nothing changes. There is no faint glow, no distant flicker of torchlight. Only a suffocating, endless black. The air is cold and damp, thick with a smell that clings to your throat. Mold, rot, and something far worse. This is not just a prison. This is a place where the world forgets you. Medieval prisons were rarely built as separate buildings. Instead, they were hidden beneath something else. Castles, fortresses, town halls, sometimes even churches. Life above continued as if nothing was wrong. Markets were full, people laughed, bells rang through the streets. But beneath the stone floors, there was another world entirely. A world without time, without comfort, without mercy. To reach it, you had to go down. Narrow stone staircases twisted deep into the ground, often so tight that only one person could pass at a time. With each step, the air grew colder. Moisture covered the walls, and water dripped constantly, the sound echoing through the silence like a slow, endless countdown. By the time you reached the bottom, the outside world felt impossibly far away. The cells were small and uneven, carved into stone or built from rough, jagged blocks. Some had iron bars, but many did not. Instead, they were sealed with thick wooden doors, sometimes with nothing more than a small opening. Barely enough to pass food through, if food came at all. There was no comfort inside, no sense of order. Just stone, darkness, and whatever you had brought with you. Fear, confusion, and the growing realization that you might not leave. Light was a luxury prisoners rarely experienced. Torches were expensive, candles required effort, and no one was willing to waste them on those locked away below. Most prisoners lived in complete darkness. Not dim light, complete, unbroken blackness. Over time, it did more than limit sight. It began to erase reality itself. Without light, there was no sense of day or night. Time stopped existing in any meaningful way. Hours blended into days, days into something even less defined. Some prisoners tried to count heartbeats, breaths, drops of water, but eventually even that became impossible. Memory faded, thoughts slowed, and the mind, desperate for something to hold on to, began to create its own horrors. You start to hear things. At first, it's just the dripping water. Then, other sounds emerge. Chains dragging across stone. A distant cough. The quiet murmur of voices far away. Sometimes there is crying. Sometimes, laughter. And sometimes there are screams. Sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. They echo through the corridors, bouncing off the walls so you cannot tell where they come from. But you understand what they mean. Somewhere in the darkness, someone is being questioned. And sooner or later, it might be your turn. Not everyone in these prisons was a criminal in the way we understand it today. Some were thieves, yes. Others were accused of violence. But many were there for reasons that feel almost unreal now. People who couldn't pay their debts. Those who had offended someone powerful. Women accused of witchcraft with no real evidence. Ordinary individuals who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. In many cases, guilt didn't matter. Accusation was enough. And once you were inside, proving your innocence became nearly impossible. The first night was often the hardest. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No one explained anything. No one told you how long you would be there or what would happen next. You were simply thrown into the darkness, and the door closed behind you. At first, you might shout, demand answers, beg to be let out. But no one responded. Your voice echoed back at you, then disappeared into silence. Eventually, you stopped trying. Breathing itself could become difficult. Ventilation was almost non-existent. The air was stale, heavy, sometimes so thick it felt like it pressed against your chest. In deeper parts of the dungeon, oxygen was limited. Every breath felt shallow, incomplete, and the smell made it worse. Human waste collected in corners. Rotting straw used as bedding was rarely replaced. Bodies, unwashed, sick, and desperate, shared the same confined space. And sometimes the smell hinted at something even more disturbing. Not everyone survived. And not all bodies were removed quickly. Some prisoners were kept completely alone, locked away in total isolation. Others were forced together in cramped cells, packed so tightly that there was barely room to move. Overcrowding was common, especially in cities. It didn't matter who you were or what you had done. You could find yourself trapped beside strangers, some terrified, others violent, all desperate. In such conditions, survival was uncertain. Hunger, fear, and lack of space turned people against each other. Trust disappeared quickly, and through all of it, one thing remained constant: the waiting. Because prison was rarely the end. It was only the beginning of something worse. Interrogation, judgment, punishment, sometimes execution. But you never knew when it would happen. A guard's footsteps in the corridor could mean anything. Food if you were lucky, or the moment everything changed. Every sound became a signal. Every moment carried tension. With each passing day or what felt like days, the same question began to take over your thoughts. Am I ever getting out of here? Medieval prisons were not designed for comfort. They were not even designed for people to live in for long. They were designed to break them. The cold weakened the body. Hunger drained strength. Disease spread quickly in the confined, filthy air. But it was the mind that suffered the most. Isolation, fear, uncertainty. These were the real tools of the dungeon. Because a broken person is easier to control, easier to question, easier to condemn. And deep beneath the stone, in the darkness where no one could see and no one could hear, countless lives slowly unraveled, one silent night at a time. Time no longer moves the way it used to. There are no mornings here, no nights, no rhythm to hold on to. Only a slow, endless stretch of existence where each moment feels the same as the last. If you are still counting the days, you won't be for long. Eventually, even that slips away. What replaces time is routine. Not a structured one, but a brutal, repetitive cycle built around the most basic need: survival. The first thing you learn is that food is never guaranteed. When it does come, it arrives without warning. A small hatch opens, or the door creaks just enough for a hand to push something inside. No words are exchanged. No explanation is given. What you receive is barely enough to keep you alive. Coarse bread, often stale or hardened to the point where it hurts to chew. Sometimes a thin, watery broth, more like dirty water than soup. Meat is rare, and when it appears, it's often spoiled. You eat it anyway, because hunger in a dungeon is not like ordinary hunger. It doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it consumes you. It sharpens your thoughts at first, then slowly dulls them. Your body weakens, your patience disappears, and over time, your sense of dignity begins to fade. In overcrowded cells, food becomes something more dangerous than hunger itself. It becomes something to fight over. A piece of bread can turn strangers into enemies. Hands grab, voices rise, bodies push against each other in the dark. The strongest take more. The weakest take what's left, if anything remains at all. And the guards? They do nothing. Sometimes they even watch, as if this quiet violence is part of the punishment. Water is no better. Clean water is rare. What prisoners receive is often taken from the same sources used for waste, or it sits stagnant in containers for days. It smells, tastes wrong. But refusing to drink means risking death even faster. So you drink, knowing it may be harming you because you have no other choice. And that is how disease begins. Illness spreads quickly in a medieval prison, faster than you can imagine. There is no separation between the sick and the healthy. No treatment, no medicine, no understanding of how infection works. One person coughs, and within days others follow. Fevers rise, bodies shake, skin grows pale and damp. In the darkness, it becomes impossible to tell who is getting worse and who might survive. Sometimes you only realize someone has died when they stop moving. The body remains there in the same space as the living. Hours pass, sometimes days. The smell changes first, thick, unmistakable. Then the others begin to shift away, pressing themselves against the walls, trying to create distance where there is none. Eventually, guards may come to remove the body, or they may not. Insects thrive in these conditions. Fleas, lice, rats, every kind of pest finds its way into the cells. They crawl across skin, bite, spread infection. Sleep becomes impossible not only because of fear, but because your own body is under constant attack. You scratch until your skin breaks, wounds form, and without treatment, even the smallest injury can become deadly. Sleep itself is never truly restful. If you are alone, the silence can be overwhelming. Your mind refuses to settle, replaying memories, imagining possibilities, creating fears that feel real enough to touch. If you are not alone, sleep is even more dangerous. You cannot fully relax. You cannot trust the people around you. Someone might take your food. Someone might harm you. Or worse, they might already be losing control of themselves. Because the mind does not survive this place easily. Days, or what feel like days, pass without stimulation. No conversation, no light, no sense of movement. The brain begins to turn inward. Thoughts become louder. Memories sharper. Regrets heavier. Some prisoners begin talking to themselves, just to hear a voice. Others whisper into the darkness, as if someone might answer. Sometimes they believe someone does. Hallucinations are not uncommon. Shapes in the darkness. Voices that seem real. The feeling of being watched, even when you are alone. The human mind is not built for this kind of isolation, and eventually it begins to break. But not everyone breaks in the same way. Some grow quiet, retreating completely into themselves. Others become aggressive, unpredictable. Small arguments turn into violent outbursts. In tight spaces, there is nowhere to escape. Every emotion is amplified, every reaction more dangerous. And still, the routine continues. Wait, listen, eat when food comes. Drink what you are given. Try to rest. Try to endure. Hope becomes something fragile. At first, you might hold on to it tightly. You imagine release, a trial, someone realizing a mistake has been made. But as time stretches on without answers, hope begins to feel unrealistic, then painful, then unnecessary. Some prisoners let it go completely. Others cling to it even when there is no reason left. Religion often becomes the last refuge. In the darkness, many turn to prayer. Whispered words repeated over and over, not always out of faith, but out of desperation. It gives structure to the emptiness, something to focus on, something to believe in, even when everything else has been taken away. But belief does not change the conditions. The cold remains. The hunger returns again and again. The air stays heavy and foul. The sounds never fully disappear. And above all, the waiting continues. Because deep down, every prisoner understands something important. This is not the final punishment. This is only preparation. A slow, grinding process designed to weaken the body, to exhaust the mind, to strip away resistance. So that when the door finally opens, not for food, not for water, but for something else, you are no longer the same person who first entered. You are quieter, weaker, more afraid, and far more likely to do whatever is asked of you. Even if it means confessing to something you never did. Even if it means walking willingly toward whatever awaits beyond the darkness. Because by the time that moment comes, survival is no longer about freedom. It is about ending the suffering, no matter the cost. At some point, the waiting ends. Not with an announcement, not with an explanation, just the sound of footsteps approaching your cell. Slower than usual, more deliberate. Keys clink. The door opens. And for the first time in what feels like forever, light enters the darkness. It burns. Even the faintest torchlight is overwhelming after so long without it. Your eyes struggle to adjust, watering instantly. Shapes blur. Shadows stretch across the walls like something alive. You raise a hand to shield your face, but it doesn't help much. Come. The voice is cold, flat, not angry, worse than that, indifferent. You hesitate for a moment, not because you think you can refuse, but because something inside you already understands what this means. Still, you move, because there is no other choice. The corridor feels different when you walk through it. larger than you imagined, yet somehow more suffocating. You pass other doors, some silent, some not. A low moan slips through one, a faint whisper from another. You don't look too closely. You are led upward or sometimes deeper. Either way, you are being taken somewhere with a purpose. The interrogation room is not always what people imagine. There is no single design, no standard layout. Sometimes it is just another stone chamber slightly larger than the cells. Other times it is more deliberate, prepared, organized, almost clinical in its simplicity. A table, a chair, chains fixed to the wall or floor, and in some cases instruments, not always visible at first, sometimes hidden in shadows or covered, as if their presence does not need to be announced. Because the people who enter this room already know why they are here. You are positioned where they want you. Sitting, standing, restrained, it depends. The guards step back, and then someone else steps forward. The interrogator. He does not shout. He does not rush. In many cases, he speaks calmly, almost politely. That is part of the process. Because the goal is not immediate pain. The goal is confession. You have been accused. That is often how it begins. The accusation may be clear, or it may be vague. Theft, betrayal, heresy, witchcraft. Sometimes multiple accusations at once. Evidence is rarely presented in any meaningful way. Names might be mentioned, people who have supposedly spoken against you. Whether they actually did is something you may never know. You try to explain, to deny, to defend yourself. At first, you are allowed to speak. The interrogator listens, nodding occasionally, asking questions. Not to understand, but to test. To look for hesitation, contradiction, weakness. Every word you say is turned, examined, and often used against you. And slowly, you begin to realize something unsettling. The truth may not matter here, because in many medieval systems, interrogation was not about discovering what happened. It was about confirming what was already believed. And if your words do not match that belief, they will be changed. The first stage is psychological. No pain. Not yet. You are told what will happen if you do not cooperate. Not in detail, just enough to let your imagination do the work. You are reminded of how long you have already been in the dungeon. How weak you are. How alone. Sometimes you are promised relief. Confess and things will be easier. Confess and the suffering will end sooner. Confess and perhaps you will be shown mercy. It is a carefully constructed illusion, because even those promises are uncertain. But in your condition, hungry, exhausted, disoriented, they sound real enough to consider. You hesitate, and that hesitation is noticed. When words are not enough, the methods change. Restraints tighten. Your position becomes less comfortable, then painful, then unbearable. Time stretches again, but in a different way now. Not slow and empty, but sharp and intense. Every second becomes something you feel, something you cannot escape. The interrogator continues to speak, calm, controlled, asking the same questions again and again. Did you do it? Who helped you? Who else is involved? The answers you give no longer seem to matter, only whether they match what is expected. And if they don't, the pressure increases. Medieval interrogations often followed a pattern. Gradual escalation. Pain introduced step by step, not all at once. The idea was simple: break the will, not just the body. To bring a person to the point where resisting feels more unbearable than agreeing. You begin to understand this. At first, you hold on. You repeat the truth or what you believe is the truth. You try to stay consistent, to stay strong. But your body is already weakened from the dungeon. Your mind is already strained. And this room is designed to take advantage of both. Time loses meaning again. You do not know how long you have been there. Minutes, hours, it becomes impossible to tell. The only thing that matters is the present moment, and how much you can endure. The interrogator watches carefully. Not just your words, but your reactions. The way you breathe. The way your voice changes. The moment your resistance begins to crack. Because that moment is everything. And eventually, for many, it comes. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just a shift. Pause before answering. A change in tone. A willingness, however small, to say something different. Something that aligns more closely with what is being demanded. The interrogator notices immediately. The pressure may ease, just slightly. A question is repeated, but this time with a different expectation. And you understand. This is the way out. Not freedom, not truly, but an end to this moment. So you say it. First, only part of it. A small admission. Something that feels less like a lie, more like a compromise. But it doesn't stop there. Because once the first line is crossed, the rest becomes easier, or perhaps just more inevitable. More details are required. More names. More confirmation. And with each answer, the reality shifts further away from what actually happened. Until eventually the story is complete. A confession. Whether it is true no longer matters. What matters is that it exists, can be written down, presented, used as evidence. It justifies what comes next. It closes the gap between accusation and judgment. And for the system, that is enough. When it is over, you are not the same person who entered the room. Physically, you are weaker. Mentally, something has changed. Because you now understand something you didn't before. This place does not need truth. It only needs compliance. You are taken back to your cell. The darkness returns, swallowing you again. But it feels different now. Heavier. More final. Because the waiting is no longer uncertain. You know what is coming next. Judgment. Punishment. Possibly execution. And the worst part? You may have just helped ensure it. In medieval prisons, interrogations were not just a step in the process. They were the turning point, the moment where resistance ended, and fate was sealed. Not by what you did, but by what you were made to say. After the interrogation, something changes. Not immediately, not in a way you can clearly see or touch, but you feel it. The uncertainty that once filled every moment is gone. In its place comes something heavier, something final. The waiting is still there, but now it has a direction. You are no longer just a prisoner. You are someone who has confessed. And in the world of medieval justice, that changes everything. The trial, if it happens at all, is often brief. Sometimes you are taken from your cell and brought into a hall, a place far more open than anything you have seen in what feels like a lifetime. Light pours in through high windows or flickering torches line the walls. After so long in darkness, it feels unreal, almost overwhelming. Figures stand before you. Officials, judges, men of authority. Their faces are clearer than anything you have seen in weeks or months. Yet they feel distant, disconnected, as if they belong to another world. Your confession is presented, not as something uncertain, not as something to question, but as fact. There may be questions, but they are not meant to uncover truth. They are meant to confirm what has already been decided. You are asked to repeat parts of your confession, to agree, to affirm. And in that moment, you understand something with terrifying clarity. This is not a chance to defend yourself. This is a formality. In some cases, there is no trial at all. The decision is made without you ever leaving the dungeon. A guard simply arrives one day, opens the door, and gives the order. You are told what will happen, not asked, not consulted. Your fate has already been written. Punishments varied, but they all shared one thing in common. They were meant to be seen. Justice in the medieval world was not private. It was public, visible, and often deliberately brutal. It served as a warning, a message to everyone who might be watching. And so, when the time comes, you are taken out of the prison. For the first time in what feels like forever, you feel fresh air. It is sharp, almost painful in your lungs. The sky above you seems too bright, too wide, too unreal. Sounds return all at once. The noise of people, movement, life continuing as it always has. The world did not stop while you were gone. It moved on without you. Crowds gather. Some come out of curiosity, others out of excitement. Public executions were events, moments that drew people from across towns and villages. There is talking, movement, anticipation. You are brought forward. Your condition is visible to everyone, thin, weak, unsteady. The time in the dungeon has left its mark. And that, too, is part of the display. It shows what happens to those who are accused, those who are found guilty, or those who simply could not prove otherwise. The method of execution depends on many things: your alleged crime, your social status, the customs of the region. Some are quick, others are not, but almost all are designed to be remembered, because the goal is not just to end a life. It is to create fear, to reinforce control, to remind everyone watching that this system holds absolute power. For the prisoner, the moment before the end is often described as strangely quiet. Not around them. The crowd may still be there, voices rising and falling, but inside, after everything, the darkness, the hunger, the interrogation, there is a kind of stillness, because the waiting is finally over. There are no more questions, no more uncertainty, just the final moment. Not everyone reaches this point. Some die in the dungeon before judgment ever comes. Disease, starvation, injury, any one of these can end a life long before a sentence is carried out. Others are forgotten completely, left in their cells with no record, no trial, no conclusion. Their existence fades quietly, unnoticed by the world above. And in some rare cases, there is release. But even that is not what it seems. A person who leaves a medieval prison does not leave unchanged. The body may survive, but the mind carries everything that happened in the darkness. The memories, the fear, the loss of time, they do not disappear. Freedom, in those cases, is something fragile, something incomplete. For most, however, the story ends publicly, with a sentence carried out in front of witnesses, with a life reduced to a warning. And then, it is over. The crowd disperses, the noise fades, the space empties, life continues, the prison remains. Beneath the stone, the cells are still there, dark, cold, silent. New prisoners arrive. New accusations are made. The cycle continues, repeating itself over and over again. Because medieval prisons were never just about holding people. They were part of something larger, a system built on fear, control, and the idea that breaking a person was sometimes more important than understanding them. And behind those closed doors, far below the surface, countless stories were never told. Voices lost in the darkness. Lives erased without a trace. All hidden away in a place where, once the door closed, the world simply forgot you ever existed.